Like my entire goal in life is to have Teyana Taylor's abs.
I don't know if I'll ever get
You could
there.
like grade cheese on those abs.
Jeez.
Like it's sharp as a
Dang. Chiseled.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Ride Home Podcast. My name is Abby.
Hey, this is Caitlin.
I remembered the name of our podcast this time. I'm very proud of myself.
Impressed. Off to a great start.
Yeah, we're really killing it this season. We are very excited to be back with a movie that I don't know if there was really any buzz for it. There was barely any marketing.
No.
I don't think I saw a trailer on TV. I don't think I saw social media posts about it. And we got really lucky that we have some really good friends that we've made on Instagram who reviewed it and really loved this movie and suggested that we go see it.
Yes.
So shout out to Eric, especially.
I was going to say, we wouldn't have known about this movie because I think Eric was the first one that told us about it.
Yeah. He made a post and it was like, this is it. Like, that's what his words were. And I was like, oh my God, like, trust his opinion. So we went to go see 1001, which is kind of like, from what I can tell from her IMDb, like a debut feature for A.V. Rockwell, who is a female director, which we love and are excited about. It looks like previously she directed a lot of shorts and music videos.
Okay.
As a music video
Connoisseur.
Aficionado, connoisseur. I think every gay person is really.
You more than others, though, because we're both queer.
Right.
But I would say that you are way more well versed in the music video realm than I am.
I'm gonna give a shout out to my friend Troy because he really is the one that got me into music videos. Also gay. We worked in the Cage, which was our college's equipment room for the film department, and so we basically were in charge of like upkeep and renting out the equipment to students. And every Friday we worked the same shift together, and it was basically the whole day, and we watched music videos the entire time.
I love that.
Sometimes ignoring people. Like they would come up and we'd be like, hold on one second, like let's
finish this
and
one.
They're like, I have class in 10 minutes, like you
Like,
need to hurry up.
Sorry.
And we're just like, you know what, it's
Lady Gaga.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We would get equipment requests like the day before, and so we would fill them really quickly and have them piled in stacks around the room. And then
so
people
you didn't have to do anything.
Yeah, and then people, and technically speaking, like you weren't allowed to let students past the doorway because they weren't trained. And we would just be like, go get your stuff. It's in that corner. And we're just like glued to the screen watching music videos.
I love that. What a fun tradition.
But I will say that there's something very special about music videos, and that if you can create a really good music video, I feel like that really does translate well into narrative filmmaking.
Yeah.
For example, the guys who did Everything
Daniels.
Everywhere. Yeah. So the Daniel directors who did Everything Everywhere All at Once, they were music video directors. A.V. Rockwell, also music video director.
Yeah.
And the star of her movie, 1001, is Teyana Taylor, who was a choreographer and a dancer and a singer.
Yeah.
Also involved in music videos. And I also noticed that the cinematographer for this movie, most of his previous work is music videos.
Interesting.
And so there was something really cool when I was going through the IMDb page for this, like in preparation to see it. I was like, these are all like either newcomers or people who are new to drama, but like there's that thread of like music videos and choreography. And I loved that going into this.
Yeah. And that is interesting because I think, like you said, if you have experience as a singer, as someone who has worked in music videos, you do have that sort of narrative background. And also it kind of bodes well because I feel like you're all sort of speaking the same language.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is really cool because I think knowing that now, like I didn't know that going into the movie.
Yeah.
So having seen the movie, it makes sense. And also you can kind of tell based on how things were shot and just sort of how the movie moved around and how the pacing was.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It's really cool.
Yeah. I'm going to touch into it a little bit more once we get into like the meat and potatoes of the story. But I'm going to quickly say that this movie does require a spoiler, no spoiler section. So when you hear the elevator music, we will be going into a spoiler section where we're going to talk about everything that happens in the movie. Please be careful.
We'll keep it separate and we'll make it very clear when we are going to go into the spoiler
Very
section.
clear. So that being said, if you don't mind kicking us off with a quick cast list and spoiler-free synopsis for everyone.
Okay. So this movie stars Teyana Taylor, our lead, William Catlett, and Josiah Cross. And then our synopsis: unapologetic and free-spirited Inez kidnaps her 6-year-old son Terry from the foster care system. They set out to reclaim their sense of home, identity, and stability in a rapidly changing New York City.
Awesome. Well, because we always start with you, what are your thoughts and feelings on 1001?
First and foremost, I thought it was a great film. I loved it. I was really captivated, honestly, from the beginning. I felt like it really held my attention, and I was just waiting to see what was going to happen next. And I thought that it was a great story, but there was kind of several plot points. Yeah. Which was interesting.
It was very layered.
Very, very layered. And I thought it did a pretty good job of telling those stories. The only issue that I did have with this movie was a little bit with the pacing. Just of the plot points themselves, I thought some of the timing was a little bit interesting. And I'll talk about that again when we get to the spoiler section, because I can't really bring up the specific things that I want to talk about, but I just felt like certain things got too much time story wise, and then other things didn't get enough time,
a little glossed over. Yeah, I think you could see that it was her first movie for sure. Super strong, really incredibly strong. And if this is her first like real feature film, I can only imagine what she can create from here. But I felt like there were some scenes that did struggle with pacing. The dialogue often felt a little overwritten. It gave hints of needing an editor with a little bit more experience. I don't know who she, sent her script through. That being said, however, I think her ability to create characters and to create distinct motivations, and every single person that we met in that story had these like deep and intricate backstories. And so where I think A.V. Rockwell struggled a little bit with the writing, I think she overcame those struggles with how incredibly well directed it was. Yes. The editing as well held her back. I don't know who edited this. I felt a little bit of that pull, like that drag through some scenes where I wanted it to pick up the pace a little bit. However, again, this was a masterclass in both world building and character building. 100%. You felt like you were in New York City. Yes. In the 90s and the 2000s. Yes. You felt like you knew these characters. And I think the most impressive thing that A.V. Rockwell was able to do in this, and that Teyana Taylor was able to do in this, was to create this massively complicated character that you are both a little afraid of and also inspired by, rooting for, and also waiting to see what happens to this person who has made these very questionable and complex choices. To have a character that well built for a debut is so impressive, because really people struggle to make complex characters a lot, because either they make someone who is supposed to be likable, but really they create this like asshole, and then no one can connect to it, and you're just like, well, they're an asshole, why would I root for them? Right. Or you create these like godlike heroes that have no faults and no questionable choices, and you're just like, yay, they killed the bad guy. Right. This is one that really felt like a person.
I was going to say, especially her as the main character, but every person in this film felt like a genuine person that could exist in real life. Some of the most, like you said, the most complex character development, and some of the realist character development that I've seen in a film in a long time.
In addition to that really impressive like character development was a set of 3 just truly incredible performances. I'm also going to shout out little Terry because he was so cute. He wasn't the greatest actor for sure, but he was adorable.
He's precious.
But her son, Terry, is played by 3 different actors at 3 different ages of his life. And Josiah Cross plays 17-year-old Terry. And I know a lot of the buzz about this movie is about Teyana Taylor, and she definitely deserves her flowers.
100%.
It's going to be really difficult for me to not put her in the Oscar picture at the end of this year. Josiah Cross, though, I was just incredibly moved by him, literally to the point of crying.
I'm like getting goosebumps thinking about his performance.
I would also say Teyana Taylor's or Inez's love interest, William Catlett, who plays Lucky. I thought Lucky was an incredibly complex character as well, and he gave an amazing performance. But there was something about Josiah Cross that stood out to me almost from the first scene he was in.
I was just going to say, the second he was on screen, I was like, oh,
yeah,
he's here.
Yeah.
Something else I noticed is the like 13-year-old Terry was a very forgettable performance. And also I didn't feel as connected to his performance to the younger Terry, but Josiah Cross, I felt like completely matched young Terry's energy.
Absolutely.
And it was like, if Terry was 17, this is what he would be like. I think that's why his performance stood out as much as it did, because it was like, oh shit, like he's that little boy.
There was a scene at the beginning of the movie where Inez goes to work and Terry has to entertain himself for the day. And he's just rolling around on the floor and on the couch, and he's, you know, playing video games and all that. And there was a scene later in the film when Inez is talking to the landlord and Terry's rolling around on the couch, and he's a teenager. But it was like you said, it was looking at, you could see these similarities of this little boy who is now this young adult, but like he's still a little boy. At heart. Yeah. His performance was captivating, heartbreaking, inspiring, all of the words that you can give a performance. And I know that it was such a small part of the movie because he is played by 3 different actors. But I hope he gets some recognition for this movie too, because I know basically the whole world is singing Teyana Taylor's praises right now, and absolutely she deserves it. Don't want to downplay that, but he deserves a lot of recognition for this too, because his performance really was the like bleeding heart of this movie.
100%.
And you might agree with me, this movie was the closest thing to a novel that I've seen on screen.
Yes.
Even more so than like movies that are based on novels. It felt like I was reading a novel, but I was just sitting there in a theater watching a movie. Yeah. And it was crazy because there are times where they'll make a novel into a movie and it's not that successful.
I completely agree. I think it had that feel to it, again, because the narrative piece was so strong. And I also felt like at times where I was like, this could totally, like, if you put something up at the end at the credits that said this was based on a true story, I would believe it. Yeah. But like, it felt more real than like a movie that you've seen that's based on a true story. Like, I don't even know how to explain it, but it just felt like this actually happened.
And you just have to give credit to like all of the people involved, like A.V. Rockwell and these actors who were just, you can tell that they really studied their material and not only studied it, but they became these people. And they, at no point did you ever question like the authenticity of these characters. There was, even if some dialogue felt forced, you were very quickly pulled back because of their obvious love for the people who they were playing. Yeah. Like you could tell that each actor loved the human that they were playing or portraying, even if that human wasn't a real person.
100%.
And that through line of acknowledging that people are complex and aren't perfect, but are still trying to love and to give love and receive love. And I mean, it was a really impressive movie to watch, I thought.
Because it was so genuine and because it was so real, that through line of just the depiction of like the rawness of humanity and of people still having something in them that's redeemable. Yeah. Even if they're a criminal, even if they've done something horrible. Right. Like they're literally just trying to do their best. Yeah. And they are just trying to find love and be loved. Yeah. And I thought that was beautiful. It was interesting. There was like a whole separate story going on about New York City.
Yeah, about like the gentrification of New York. Yeah.
And I thought that at times it was a little disconjointed, just how they introduced like Rudy Giuliani and like the different sort of things that were happening in New York. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was cool that they did that. And I thought it was important to the story, but just how they did it a little bit sometimes broke up the movie for me. Like you said, I think this kind of goes back to it being her first movie. I think she was trying to do a whole bunch, and it could have been scaled back, I think, a little bit, some of the New York storyline.
Right.
But again, it's like, if that wasn't in there, maybe it wouldn't have worked as well. You know, maybe it would have been too focused on the characters.
Yeah, I agree with you, because there was a point where I got a little sick of hearing Rudy Giuliani's voice, but that's also just because, like, just complete transparency, I hate the man. I thought it was really interesting when she first gets Terry, she very quickly is able to find a job and find an apartment. And I thought to myself, just like immediately thinking, I was like, you could never do that now.
No.
You would have to live with somebody else. You would have to find roommates. You would have to find a family to live with, something, because right now a single mother could not just go find a job at styling hair and then get a one-bedroom apartment.
No.
There's no way.
Not in the city.
Yeah.
Impossible.
And so I thought it was really interesting watching her almost struggle more as time went on, as New York changed. And I know we used to live in a part of Charleston that is getting exceptionally gentrified. We could feel like ourselves getting priced out, and we could only imagine what was happening to these very long-term residents who owned these homes in the area, and the property taxes, I'm sure, were pricing them out of their own homes.
Right.
And so I can only imagine a place like New York City, which is like triple expensive compared to down here. I really thought that storyline was so central to Inez and her struggle, and I think it was a very real story about how that process has affected families in not just New York, but everywhere in America.
Sure. It was interesting to see that, because I know A.B. Rockwell's from New York.
Yeah.
And so it's probably a lived experience in some ways for her.
Yeah.
And so I think it is something that is relatable to a lot of people, but especially to people from New York, because it was such a specific time then, you know, with Giuliani and everything that he did. There was a part where it was his voice talking about whatever he was going to be doing, and they just showed like an Old Navy, Target, like all these like just regular old things that they built up in New York in the city, and it was just like, oh man, like that was the downfall for everyone.
I thought one of the most interesting things, which I even said to you in the theater, because we actually had an empty theater, so we were able to kind of like mention things throughout, was at the beginning of the film, Inez stays with her friend and her friend's mother, and her friend's mother, who is very clearly just a middle-class woman, who she's not wealthy by any means, is living in a brownstone.
Yes.
And I was just sitting there thinking, I know now how much brownstones cost. And so that process was really interesting to watch, and to watch the changing of New York as time went on. We even saw like the stop and frisk era, which was really interesting. And watching that experience through the eyes of these characters was a really important part of the film. But I agree, occasionally she used it more as a transition than she did as a really woven part of the story.
I think that's why it felt disjointed for me, because I agree, it was a transition, like where it was just like,
here's Giuliani's voice,
and like a picture of Old Navy, like it was just, it was important, but I agree, like it was just maybe how she did it that didn't quite work.
So I definitely agree with you that pacing and transitions were a little rough around the edges, but overall I think we can both agree, an incredible film.
Definitely.
What is your popcorn score?
This is a large for me. This is definitely a large. I thought it was just so impactful, so inspiring and heartbreaking, and just, again, the character development and the acting and directing. There was just so much more good
than there was
bad. I mean, really, if the only two issues we had were the pacing and some of the transitions.
And often the pacing was because of the transitions.
Right. So kind of the same issue.
Yeah.
Besides that, no, I don't have any other critiques about this movie that I can think of. So it's a large for me.
It's also a large for me. Whatever issues there are with pacing or occasional dialogue, I am just so impressed by the entire team that made this movie. I think the direction, the cinematography, there were scenes that I just, like, you literally felt like you were in New York, but at that very specific time. I thought also, I want to touch very quickly on the music.
Yeah.
It was extremely subtle. I don't know how to explain it, but the music that carried you through the film was New York. It just sounded like New York City. And I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how that's captured in a bottle, but it was.
Yeah, 100%.
So I have to shout out the soundtrack as well, for sure. Overall, I think it was just an incredibly beautiful movie that I really hope doesn't get overlooked during Oscar season.
I know.
You know, we talked about this in our Oscars episode that the Oscars love overlooking Black women. And if Teyana Taylor is not nominated, we're going to have a problem. There's a line that Inez says in the movie where she says, "I would go to war for you." I will go to war for Teyana Taylor.
100%.
I really am just so impressed by her performance. And again, there are other performances in this movie as well, like Josiah Cross, that just, I was in awe
I know. Blown away.
Are you ready to do spoilers?
I'm so ready to do spoilers.
Welcome back to the spoiler section of the episode. I'm going to repeat that one more time because this is so important.
Yes.
This is the spoiler section. There is a massive spoiler that you need to go away from. If
do not listen past this point.
Do not continue if you plan on seeing this movie without spoilers. That being said, how shocking was that twist?
Okay. Truly one of the most shocking twists in a movie.
Yeah.
Ever.
I did not see it coming in the slightest.
No. And that says something.
Yeah.
Because I always figure it out. You always can tell when something is off or something is amiss in a movie. Like, you can always tell. And usually you don't tell me because it pisses me off.
Yeah.
But this one, we genuinely looked at each other and went, what? And held on to each other.
The second the counselor says, Inez is not your biological mother, I experienced what you refer to as fear tears.
Yes.
I have never experienced that before.
Okay.
When she said that, my eyes welled up and I felt like it was like I was hot. And there was like a burning sensation like in my cheeks and my eyes welled up, and it was just this feeling of complete shock.
It was horror.
And it like flipped my stomach. And it reminded me, this is like a cheesy bad horror movie that M. Night Shyamalan directed, but do you remember The Visit?
Yes.
Whenever they reveal that the grandparents aren't the grandparents.
Yes.
Like when she's like, those aren't your grandparents.
Ugh,
Goosebumps. There's something really deeply unsettling about somebody pretending to be someone else.
Yes, it's very disarming.
Yeah. And I think what was really the highlight of this movie for me was Terry / Josiah Cross coming to terms with it and watching his horror in real time of sometimes in movies they take the cheap way out with twists and they reveal the twist and then they cut away so that the audience is the one that feels the emotions, I guess, and then we come back to that character after they've processed it. I loved watching Terry process it in real time and realizing this person that has given him her everything and realizing, holy shit, like this isn't even my mother.
Just a woman who kidnapped me.
Yeah.
Who kidnapped me.
Yeah. And then what was really interesting was when he confronts Inez about it. And what I thought was a really impressive part of the story was that Inez was waiting for this day. She was so cool, calm, collected, and was just ready to tell the truth. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't angry. She was just like, okay, the day's come.
Yep. And she's like, let's face the music.
Yeah. Again, the master class on complexity was finding out that she kidnapped him, but she kidnapped a child that was wandering a street corner for hours and hours and hours. And she realized that nobody was coming for him. So she took him. Is that a bad thing? Like, you know? And I think that was the beauty of this movie, was that this was a choice that came from such a good place, but it was on paper the horrifying wrong choice.
Right.
And Terry's response to her, where he is like, you know, you're my mother and this is my home, and like that's my bed, and realizing like, hey, you might not be my biological mother, but like in my head you still are.
I think that was part of the interesting thing too, is that Inez, at that point also, she has nothing to lose because her husband is dead.
Yeah.
Her house is literally falling apart around her, and she's basically getting kicked out of her
home that she's lived in for like
only
17
place
years.
she's ever really owned by herself.
Or I guess 10 years.
Yeah. And at this point, it's like, yeah, you may as well just know. I thought it was also interesting that the entire time of the movie, she always had her hair done. She always had her makeup done. She always had her shit together. And by this point, she's unraveled.
Yeah.
And she looks...
no makeup.
She looks a mess.
Yeah.
And she's just like, fuck it.
Yeah.
And I think she was prepared for him to reject her and leave her. I think she had mentally prepared herself for like, the day he finds out is the day I'm going to lose him.
And you can see her like putting her armor back on, where she's like, you know, a little cold to him, and she's waiting for him to tell her off. And she's basically like, let me have it.
Yeah.
Almost.
Like, I deserve it at this point.
Yeah.
I think what was so interesting about how the end of this movie played out is that that's not what he did. He processed the fact that this is not his biological mother, and basically his whole life has been a lie. But at the same point, he's a person, and he was a literal abandoned child. And this person took him in, and like you said, did everything for him. And their life was not perfect at all. But she afforded him opportunities that he would have never had without her. And I think there's something to say about a person who is a mother versus a person who is a mom. And she's his mom. You know? And he, in that moment, is like, I don't really care who you are. You're my mom, and this is our house. And this is our home. And I think, you know, when he says he misses his bed, like, I just like fell to pieces, because he was like not going to let go of his whole life with her, this person who took care of him the best she could, because Lord knows she was broken, and again, she had plenty of faults, but she loved him and she took care of him, and he can't let that go. And I think it was so beautiful, because she really was prepared for him to just be like, fuck you. And he didn't do that. And, you know, he goes to his room and he gets his stuff, and he goes and he sits on the couch with her and he holds her hand. And it was just like, my heart like shattered into a million pieces. Because in that moment, you just see them like clinging to each other, and knowing that like moving forward, everything is changed. But it's like holding on to what you've always known. And it was just so poignant. Like, I don't know. I didn't see the twist, and I didn't see it ending how it ended.
I also thought that it was interesting, because one of the through lines between Terry and Inez's relationship was that Terry, being a young boy, was really infatuated with his stepfather, who is Inez's boyfriend, Lucky. who becomes her husband.
Sure.
And he really looks up to him.
Mm-hmm.
And we get these little pockets of their relationship growth
mm-hmm.
throughout time. And we see that even if Inez and Lucky are struggling,
mm-hmm.
Lucky loves Terry and
mm-hmm.
takes care of him and
mm-hmm.
protects him. And I think there was this one scene where Terry says, like, even more than wanting a mother, I always wanted a father.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was super interesting that at the end of the movie, I think Terry slowly realizes, like, everything that Inez did for him,
mm-hmm.
where, you know, he had this kind of hero worship of Lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really interesting how at the end at Lucky's funeral, there's a woman standing across the street
mm-hmm.
and she's holding a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And Terry looks at Inez and is like, who is that? And just as chill as could be, as chill as a cucumber, Inez goes, that's Lucky's daughter and his mother and her mother.
Mm-hmm.
Fix them a plate.
And walks inside.
Yeah.
And you see Terry, like you said, Terry had built up this image of Lucky in his head of like, he's his father. Yeah. He's this perfect man. And in that moment, you see Terry's face and you see his face fall.
Yeah.
Because he realizes that maybe Lucky wasn't so great after all.
But he also, I think in that moment, realizes how much Inez protected him.
Mm-hmm.
She protected the image of Lucky for him. She could have easily been like, your father's a piece of shit. He cheated on me. He had a daughter and all of this stuff. And she didn't do that. She kept Lucky's integrity, especially in death, where she respected this woman
mm-hmm.
and allowed her, into this party and
basically into their home.
Yeah, into their home. And I thought that was probably beyond Josiah's performance. I thought that was my favorite part of this movie, was watching Inez love people in her own way.
Mm-hmm.
She's very clearly hardened by the life that she has had.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless of her very questionable choices, which they don't shy away from, the movie, even the counselor that initially talks to Terry says, if you were placed in a foster care, there was a reason for that.
Right.
And she said that straight up. And I think even though we see Inez make these really sometimes bad, sometimes morally gray, sometimes, we watch her make all these choices, but at the end of the day, she loves her people.
Yeah.
Which I can relate to. I'm not the softest person.
Right. Right.
I grew up in a not super affectionate household. We didn't talk about our feelings very often. My brothers and I often resorted to physical violence to solve our problems.
Sure.
We were not a cushy little fam.
Right.
Very big, Catholic and angry, which I think a lot of people can relate.
Sure.
And as time has gone on, I have softened, certainly with some help.
Yes.
And I could, even though I absolutely did not grow up in New York and I did not have a hard life, I could certainly relate to Inez in so many ways of watching her struggle with her own emotions and how to deal with them, and her own anger for what life has given her, but also her resilience. That being said, please go see this movie.
Please see this movie.
There's not a lot of time left. It did come out a little while ago. Please see it. If it starts streaming soon, please stream it. I think this is something that deserves attention for sure.
Absolutely.
Not to mention, you also get to hear absolutely wonderful New York accents through the entire movie.
Incredible.
I love a New York accent.
Me too.
Truly one of my favorite accents in all of America.
Same, honestly.
Well, that does it for us. We aren't quite sure yet what the next episode will be. We are on our little staycation, our spring break staycation, so we haven't really put a lot of thought into it, to be honest. But we will post on our Instagram what the next episode will be sometime next week. But I hope you all have a great weekend. Go see 1001. Please bring tissues and see it in the middle of the day.
Yeah, see it in the middle of the day so you can leave and have sunshine and do something fun for yourself afterwards.
It's a little draining, but in the best way possible.
In the absolute best way.
All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the ride home.